I never thought a simple Sunday service could turn my life upside down. But that's exactly what happened to me, Evelyn, a 65-year-old widow from the quiet suburbs of Chicago. Picture this. I'm sitting in my usual pew at St. Mary's Church, the sunlight filtering through the stained glass windows, casting colourful patterns on the wooden floors. The sermon is about forgiveness and family bonds, words that hit close to home for me. But then, as the congregation files out, my old friend Martha pulls me aside in the foyer, her voice dropping to a hush. She leans in close, her eyes darting around like she's sharing a forbidden secret. "Evelyn, I've heard something troubling about your son Ethan. People are saying he's been scamming elderly folks out of their savings." At first, I brush it off with a forced laugh. No way. Not my Ethan. He's 35 now, married to Lisa, with a steady job in finance. I've sacrificed everything for that boy, working night shifts as a nurse for years just to put him through college. After my husband passed away 3 years ago from that sudden car accident, Ethan was all I had left. But Martha's words linger like a bad dream, gnawing at me. I tell myself it's just gossip, the kind that spreads in small communities like ours. Still, as I shake hands with the pastor and step out into the crisp autumn air, doubt creeps in. I'm so glad you're here listening to my story. If you're watching this video, please like and subscribe to my channel, and tell me in the comments where you're tuning in from as I share this tale of betrayal and sweet revenge. It means the world to me to connect with you all. Back to that day, I decide to linger in the parking lot instead of heading straight home. Ethan had mentioned he'd stop by after church for coffee, but he doesn't show. Instead, I spot his blue sedan pulling out, heading downtown. Something pulls at me, an instinct I can't ignore. I hop into my old reliable Honda and follow at a distance, my heart pounding a little faster with each turn. The suburbs give way to the busier streets of Chicago, and soon he parks outside a cozy cafe on Michigan Avenue. I pull over across the street, slouching low in my seat like some amateur detective. Through the window, I see him meet Lisa, his wife of 5 years. They hug, order lattes, and sit at a corner table. At first, it looks innocent, but then their heads lean in close, voices too low for me to hear. I crack my window, straining to catch snippets. Plan for Mum. Get rid of the old house. Easy money once she's out. My blood runs cold. Get rid of me. The house where I raised him, where we celebrated birthdays and mourned losses. The place filled with memories of my late husband, who built the garden shed with his own hands. Tears blur my vision as I drive home, the radio droning some upbeat tune that feels mocking. How could this be real? I pull into my driveway, the familiar sight of my modest 2-story home doing little to comfort me. Inside, I go through my routine on autopilot, brewing coffee in that chipped mug I've had for decades, the one with the faded floral pattern. As I sip it black and strong, staring out the kitchen window at the African violets blooming on the sill, memories flood back. Those plants were my husband's favorites. He tended them every morning before work. I remember the long nights I worked to pay for Ethan's tuition, coming home exhausted but proud when he graduated. He promised to take care of me one day. Now those words feel like a cruel joke. Sitting at the kitchen table, I replay Martha's warning in my mind. Scamming the elderly. Is that what he's doing to others, and now to me? The pain twists in my chest, a mix of sorrow and budding suspicion. I love my son, but if there's even a shred of truth here, I need to know. That night, I barely sleep, tossing in my bed, the house feeling emptier than ever. Little did I know, this was just the beginning of uncovering a web of lies that would change everything. The doubt from that church parking lot clung to me like a shadow all week, but I couldn't shake it off. By Wednesday, I'd made up my mind to dig deeper. I ordered a small GPS tracker online, the kind they sell for keeping tabs on pets or lost luggage. It arrived the next day, and I waited for the right moment. Ethan called that evening, saying he'd swing by to check on me, his voice all casual and sweet, like nothing was wrong. When he showed up, we had coffee in the kitchen, him chatting about work while I nodded along, my heart racing. As he stepped out to take a call, I slipped outside and attached the tracker under his car's bumper, quick and quiet. It felt sneaky, wrong even, but the pain of betrayal pushed me forward. That Friday night, the app on my phone pinged with his location. He was heading downtown again, not home to Lisa like he should be. I grabbed my keys and followed, keeping a few cars back on the highway. The city lights blurred past as I gripped the wheel, my mind swirling with what-ifs. He pulled into a mid-range hotel parking lot, the kind with neon signs and valet service. I parked across the street in a shadowy spot, watching as he got out, adjusted his tie, and headed inside. Minutes later, a young woman approached, maybe in her late 20s, with sharp features and a confident stride. She wasn't Lisa. They met in the lobby, visible through the glass doors, hugging like old lovers. My stomach twisted. Who was she? How long had this been going on? I waited, the engine off. The radio turned low to some sad country station that matched my mood. An hour passed before they emerged, arm in arm, heading to his car. I tailed them to a nearby diner, parking far enough away to stay hidden. Through binoculars I'd brought just in case, I saw them at a booth, laughing over burgers and fries. The woman pulled out a laptop, and they huddled close, pointing at the screen. I couldn't hear them, but their gestures said enough, urgent and secretive. My phone buzzed with another ping from the tracker app, but I ignored it, too focused on the scene. That's when the twist hit me like a gut punch. As they leaned in, I caught glimpses of documents on the screen, medical bills with my name on them, my social security number highlighted. Ethan was showing her my personal info, nodding as she typed notes. It dawned on me then, he wasn't just cheating on Lisa, he was selling my details, scamming the elderly, like Martha had whispered, my own son, peddling my identity to some underground network for quick cash. The woman smiled, kissed him on the cheek, and slid an envelope across the table, thick with what looked like bills. I sank back in my seat, tears streaming down my face, hot and unstoppable. The betrayal cut deeper than I imagined, a knife twisting in my chest. All those years of sacrifice, the nights I went without sleep to cover his college loans, the way I'd defended him to friends when he skipped family holidays. And now this, not just fraud on my medical bills to skim money, but handing over my life on a platter to strangers. Who knew what they could do with that info? Drain my accounts, ruin my credit, or worse. I wiped my eyes with my sleeve, the diner's lights reflecting off the wet streaks on my cheeks. Part of me wanted to storm in, confront him right there, but the shock held me back. I needed more proof, something solid to build on. As they left the diner, driving off together, I started my car and headed home, the city fading behind me. Back in my quiet house, I paced the living room, the grandfather clock ticking like a countdown. The violets on the windowsill looked wilted under the moonlight, mirroring how I felt inside. I poured another cup of coffee, but it tasted bitter now, like ashes. The pain of it all weighed heavy, a mix of sorrow for the boy I raised and fear of what he'd become. But beneath the hurt, a spark ignited. I had to uncover the full truth, no matter how ugly. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. Little did I know, the secrets ran even deeper, tied to my husband's death in ways I'd never suspected. The secrets I'd uncovered that Friday night festered inside me like an open wound, but I kept my cool, waiting for the right moment to strike back. By Sunday afternoon, Ethan and Lisa showed up unannounced, their car pulling into my driveway with that familiar crunch of gravel. I watched from the kitchen window, my coffee going cold in my hands as they stepped out, all smiles and false cheer. Ethan carried a folder under his arm, thick with papers, and Lisa held a stack of glossy brochures. They knocked, and I let them in, forcing a welcoming nod even as my pulse quickened. "Mum, we need to talk about your future," Ethan said right away, settling into my husband's old armchair like he owned the place. Lisa perched on the couch, her eyes scanning the room appraisingly. They wasted no time diving in. Ethan opened the folder, spreading documents across the coffee table, legal forms with my name typed at the top. "We've found the perfect senior community," he explained, his tone smooth and practiced, like a salesman closing a deal. "It's safe, with round-the-clock care, activities, and no more worrying about maintaining this big old house alone." Lisa chimed in, flipping open a brochure to show photos of smiling elders playing bingo and strolling manicured gardens. "You'll love it, Evelyn. It's time to let go of the stress." But I saw through the act, their words dripping with fake concern. This wasn't about my well-being. It was about clearing me out so they could flip the property for profit, especially now that I knew about his side hustle selling personal data. As they talked, Ethan stood up and started pacing the living room, casually pulling out a tape measure from his pocket. He stretched it across the walls, noting dimensions on his phone, murmuring about potential renovations and market value. Lisa joined in, opening cabinets in the kitchen like she was inspecting her future domain. "The pipes look outdated," she noted loudly, "and this flooring could use an update to boost resale." My blood boiled at the audacity, them treating my home like a commodity while I stood right there. When Ethan reached for the deed transfer form, sliding it toward me with a pen, that's when the tension snapped. "Mum, just sign here," he urged, his voice firming up. "It's for your own good. If you don't, we might have to pursue guardianship, prove you're not handling things well anymore." I refused, pushing the paper away, my voice steady but edged with anger. "No, Ethan. This is my home, and I'm staying." His face darkened, and he grabbed my wrist, squeezing just hard enough to send a jolt of pain up my arm, his grip like a vice. "Don't make this difficult," he hissed, leaning in close, his breath hot on my face. "We know what's best." The threat hung in the air, a physical reminder of how far he'd fallen. I yanked my hand free, rubbing the red mark, my heart pounding with a mix of fear and fury. They left soon after, the door slamming behind them, leaving me alone with the echo of their footsteps. That night, fueled by rage, I didn't waste time wallowing. I fired up my old desktop computer in the study, the one my husband used for emails before he passed. I'd seen enough crime shows to know the basics, and with a quick online guide I'd bookmarked earlier, I managed to access Ethan's email through a forgotten shared account from years ago, when we'd set up family logins. It took some trial and error, but soon I was in, scrolling through his inbox with shaking hands. There it was, buried in a thread, with that woman from the diner, detailed plans to forge my signature on the house deed, scan it, and list the property online before I could object. Attachments showed mocked-up documents, complete with notary stamps they planned to fake. The betrayal hit like a freight train, but it steeled my resolve. This wasn't just greed, it was outright crime. By dawn, I'd printed everything, stashed it in a safe spot, and made my first call to a lawyer I'd found through a discreet search. An old family friend from church who specialized in elder abuse cases. Her voice on the line was calm and reassuring as I laid out the basics, without giving away too much yet. "We're going to fight this," she promised, and I felt a surge of determination wash over me. No more playing the victim. Ethan had crossed a line, and I was ready to push back hard. The game had changed, and I was done being the easy mark. As the sun rose, casting light on my wilted violets, I knew the real storm was just beginning, with secrets from the past about to unravel everything. The sting of Ethan's grip on my wrist lingered all night, a burning reminder of his betrayal, but it only fueled my fire to fight back. By Monday morning, I was still reeling from the forged documents I'd found in his email, my anger simmering like a pot ready to boil over. I was in the kitchen, clutching my chipped coffee mug, when the doorbell rang, sharp and insistent. Through the window, I saw Lisa's car in the driveway, alone this time, no Ethan in sight. She barged in without waiting for an invitation, carrying cardboard boxes and a roll of packing tape, her face set in that fake smile I'd come to despise. "Evelyn, we're here to help you get started," she announced, dropping the boxes on the living room floor with a thud. I stood frozen, watching as she pulled out a marker and labeled one box "Donations," another "Keep," like she was clearing out a storage unit, not my life. She moved fast. Too fast. Crossing into my bedroom without asking, opening drawers and pulling out my clothes. My husband's old flannel shirts, the ones I still wore on cold nights, got tossed into the donations pile. When she reached for my jewelry box on the dresser, the one holding my mother's pearl necklace and my wedding band, my heart lurched. "Those are mine," I snapped, stepping forward to grab the box. Lisa rolled her eyes, yanking it back. "These old things will just get lost in that senior home," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "Better we keep them safe in our deposit box." My anger flared, but I held it in check, knowing a fight now would tip them off. Instead, I watched her pack away my memories, each item hitting the box like a punch to the gut. Her hands careless with the lace tablecloths I'd sewn for Ethan's birthdays, the photo albums from our family trips. That evening, I couldn't sit still. The house felt violated, half empty with Lisa's boxes stacked by the door. I grabbed my keys, driven by a restless fury, and checked the GPS tracker app on my phone. Ethan's car was moving, heading toward a sketchy part of Chicago's west side, far from his office or home. I followed, the city's lights giving way to dimly lit streets, warehouses looming like silent giants. He parked outside a rundown bar, the kind with boarded windows and a flickering neon sign. I stayed back, hidden in an alley, my heart pounding as I saw him meet the same woman from the diner, her sleek ponytail catching the streetlight. They didn't go inside. Instead, they stood by his car, her handing him another thick envelope, this one bulging more than the last. Ethan glanced around, then slipped it into his jacket, his movements jittery, like he knew he was being watched. The confrontation came before I could stop myself. I stepped out of the shadows, my voice cutting through the night air. "Ethan, what the hell are you doing?" He spun around, his face paling, the woman freezing beside him. "Mom," he stammered, trying to play it cool, but his eyes betrayed panic. "Just business, nothing you'd understand." The woman smirked, stepping closer to him, protective. I didn't back down, my anger erupting. "Business," I spat, like selling my identity to crooks, like forging my signature to steal my house. His jaw tightened, and he took a step toward me, his hand twitching like he might grab me again. Instead, he shoved me hard, my shoulder slamming into a brick wall, pain shooting through me as I stumbled to the ground. "Stay out of this," he growled, "or you'll regret it." The woman pulled him back, whispering something, and they sped off, leaving me sprawled in the dirt, my cheek grazed and bleeding. I dragged myself back to my car, shaking with rage and adrenaline, the scrape on my face stinging in the cool night air. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was personal, a declaration of war. At home, I cleaned the wound, staring at my reflection in the bathroom mirror, the face of a woman who'd been pushed too far. I pulled out the printed emails, adding notes about tonight's encounter, every detail seared into my mind. My lawyer's number was already on speed dial, and I left her a voicemail, my voice steady despite the fury. "We're moving forward," I told her, "no holding back." Ethan thought he could intimidate me, break me down, but he'd misjudged the mother who'd raised him. As I sat in my quiet house, the violets on the windowsill catching the moonlight, I felt a fire growing inside me, one that wouldn't stop until I'd taken back everything he'd tried to steal. The real fight was coming, and it was going to be brutal. The scrape on my cheek still burned from that alleyway shove, but it was nothing compared to the fire raging inside me after Ethan's betrayal. By Tuesday morning, I was done playing the victim. I needed answers, something to make sense of how my son turned into this monster. The house felt like a ghost town, with Lisa's boxes cluttering the living room, so I headed to the basement, where my husband's old stuff was stored in dusty crates. He'd always kept his work papers there, locked away in a metal box I hadn't touched since his funeral 3 years ago. My hands shook as I pried it open with a screwdriver, the lock giving way with a rusty snap. Inside were stacks of documents, yellowed bank statements, and a sealed envelope with my name scrawled in his familiar handwriting. My heart stopped as I tore it open. A letter from the man I'd loved for decades, written just months before his car accident. The letter hit me like a thunderbolt. "Evelyn, my love," it began. "If you're reading this, I'm gone, and you've found the legacy I hid to protect you." He'd been no ordinary accountant, as I'd thought. For years, he'd quietly built a fortune, investing in real estate and stocks, amassing $7 million in assets, including the apartment complex where Ethan and Lisa lived, plus a controlling share in the finance company Ethan worked for. But the real shock came next, a truth so dark it made my knees buckle. "I've always suspected Ethan wasn't the son we raised him to be," the letter continued. "I found a hidden camera in my car the week before my accident. It caught Ethan tampering with the brakes, Evelyn. He caused my crash, likely for the insurance payout. I survived long enough to secure this evidence on a flash drive, locked with this letter. Use it wisely, not for vengeance, but to protect yourself. I love you forever." Tears streamed down my face, splashing onto the paper as I clutched the flash drive he'd mentioned, tucked inside the envelope. My husband's death wasn't an accident. It was murder, orchestrated by the boy I'd raised as my own. I stumbled to my old laptop, hands trembling as I plugged in the drive. The video loaded, grainy but clear, showing Ethan in a dark hoodie, crouched under our car in the driveway, cutting wires with a tool. His face was unmistakable, cold and calculated, no trace of the son who'd once hugged me at graduation. The betrayal sliced through me, deeper than anything Lisa's packing or Ethan's shove could ever do. My husband had seen it coming, known Ethan's greed ran deeper than we imagined, and he'd left me the tools to fight back. I spent hours combing through the documents, each one a piece of an empire I never knew we had. Deeds to properties across Chicago, stock certificates worth millions, bank statements showing monthly deposits from tenants, all untouched since his death. I'd been living like a broke widow, scraping by on a pension, while this fortune sat hidden. The realization was a gut punch, but it lit a fire in me, a burning need to make Ethan pay for every lie, every theft, every drop of blood. The flash drive was my ace, undeniable proof of his crime, and the wealth gave me power I'd never dreamed of. By nightfall, I was pacing the basement, the cold concrete grounding my racing thoughts. Anger mixed with shock, a storm of emotions I could barely contain. I wanted to scream, to storm Ethan's apartment and confront him with the video. But I knew better. This wasn't about a quick outburst. It was about strategy. I called my lawyer, Victoria, leaving another voicemail. This one urgent. I've got evidence, I told her, my voice shaking with rage. Not just fraud, but murder. We need to move fast. As I hung up, I looked at the violets on the kitchen sill, their petals drooping under the dim light. They'd been my husband's pride, a symbol of our life together, now tainted by the truth of his death. Ethan thought he'd broken me, thought he could shove me aside like trash. He had no idea the storm I was about to unleash, one that would tear his world apart. The truth about Ethan's role in my husband's death churned inside me like a hurricane, and by Wednesday evening, I was ready to confront him with the full weight of what I'd uncovered. My hands still trembled from watching that damning video, Ethan sabotaging the car brakes with cold precision, but I channeled the shock into a steely resolve. I drove to the apartment complex I now knew I owned, the one where Ethan and Lisa lived rent-free, thinking they'd outsmarted me. The Chicago skyline loomed in the dusk, its lights a stark contrast to the darkness I felt. I parked outside their building, gripping the flash drive and a folder of key documents, the deeds and stock certificates that proved my newfound power. My lawyer, Victoria, had advised me to wait, but I couldn't, not with the image of Ethan's betrayal burned into my mind. I knocked on their door, loud and unyielding, my heart pounding like a war drum. Lisa opened it, her face twisting into a scowl when she saw me. Before she could speak, I pushed past her into the living room, where Ethan lounged on the couch, a beer in hand. He sat up, startled, his eyes narrowing. "Mum, what are you doing here?" he snapped, standing to block my path. I didn't flinch, holding up the flash drive like a weapon. "I know everything," I said, my voice low and sharp, cutting through the tension. "I know about the fraud, the forged deeds, and I know you killed your father." Lisa gasped, her hand flying to her mouth, but Ethan's face went ghostly white, his beer slipping to the floor with a crash. I tossed the folder onto their coffee table, papers spilling out, deeds to this very building, stock certificates from his company, bank statements showing millions. "Your father left me an empire," I told them, my words dripping with controlled fury. $7 million in assets, including this apartment you've been squatting in. You thought you could steal my home, my life, but you're the ones who've been living on my dime. Lisa stammered, trying to interrupt, but I pressed on, unrelenting. "And this," I held up the flash drive, "shows you cutting his brakes 3 years ago, Ethan. You murdered him for insurance money, and I've got the proof." Ethan lunged forward, his eyes wild, snatching a kitchen knife from the counter. "You're lying," he roared, waving the blade, his voice cracking with panic. "You're just a crazy old woman making this up." I stepped back, heart racing but refusing to show fear, my hand in my purse where I kept a small pepper spray, just in case. "Try me," I said, my voice steady despite the knife gleaming between us. "One call to the police, and this video goes straight to them." Ethan froze, the knife trembling in his grip, his bravado crumbling. Lisa grabbed his arm, pulling him back, her face pale as she whispered something frantic. I took my chance, backing toward the door, my eyes locked on his. "You're done, Ethan," I said, each word a hammer strike. "You have 1 day to get out of my building or I start making calls." I turned and left, the door slamming behind me, my pulse thundering as I hurried to my car. Outside, I leaned against the steering wheel, gasping, the weight of the confrontation hitting me all at once. The shock of seeing my son, my own flesh and blood, brandish a knife at me mingled with a fierce satisfaction. I'd rattled him, exposed his crimes, and for the first time, I held the upper hand. But the danger wasn't over. As I drove home, my phone buzzed, the GPS tracker app showing Ethan's car speeding toward my neighborhood. He was following me, desperate to silence the threat I'd become. I floored the gas, weaving through Chicago's streets, my mind racing as fast as the engine. Back home, I locked every door, clutching the flash drive like a lifeline. The violets on the windowsill stood silent in the moonlight, witnesses to my transformation from grieving mother to avenger. I called Victoria again, my voice urgent but firm. "He's coming for me," I told her. "We need to act now." The storm was here, and I was ready to face it head on, no matter how brutal it got. The knife Ethan waved at me in his apartment still flashed in my mind, a chilling reminder of how far he'd fallen, but it only sharpened my resolve to make him pay. By Thursday morning, I was holed up in my house, the locks triple-checked, the flash drive with the damning video tucked safely in my pocket. My lawyer, Victoria, had already started building a case, but I knew Ethan wouldn't go down without a fight. Around noon, my phone buzzed with a text from Lisa, her words dripping with desperation. "Ethan's sorry," she wrote. "He's stressed and I'm pregnant, Evelyn. Please don't ruin our family over this." The news hit like a sucker punch. A baby, my grandchild, used as a bargaining chip to manipulate me. My heart twisted, but I saw it for what it was, another attempt to control me, to make me back off from exposing his crimes. I didn't respond, instead forwarding the text to Victoria as more evidence of their tactics. That afternoon, Ethan showed up at my doorstep, alone, his face haggard, eyes bloodshot, like he hadn't slept. He knocked softly, a stark contrast to his usual bravado, and I let him in, my hand hovering near the pepper spray in my cardigan pocket. "Mum, I messed up," he started, his voice low, almost convincing. "I didn't mean to scare you with the knife. Let's work this out, for the baby's sake." He sank into the armchair, head in his hands, playing the remorseful son. But I wasn't buying it. Not after the video, not after the shove in the alley. I stood tall, my voice cold as steel. "You think a baby erases what you did?" I said, my words cutting through his act. "You killed your father, Ethan. You sold my identity, tried to steal my home. You don't get to beg for mercy now." His mask slipped, his eyes flashing with desperation as he stood, pacing the living room like a cornered animal. Then came the twist that turned my world upside down. Victoria called right then, her voice urgent through the speakerphone I put on so Ethan could hear. "Evelyn, I've been digging into your husband's records," she said, "and there's something you need to know before the trial tomorrow. Ethan isn't your biological son. Your husband had an affair years ago, and Ethan was born from it. He only told you he was yours to protect you. But the will confirms it. You're the sole heir, and Ethan gets nothing unless you allow it." The room spun, my knees nearly giving out as I gripped the counter. Ethan froze, his face a mix of shock and fury, realizing his whole claim to my life was a lie. "You're not even my real mum," he spat, his voice venomous. "But you'll regret crossing me." The revelation hit like a tidal wave, but it only fueled my fire. I pulled out the stock certificates from the folder I'd brought up from the basement, slamming them on the table. "These shares," I said, my voice rising with a mix of pain and triumph, "give me control over your company. By tomorrow you're fired, Ethan. And you're out of my building by tonight, or the police get that video." His face crumpled, but he lunged toward me, his fist raised, only stopping when I held up the pepper spray, my eyes daring him to try. He backed off, muttering threats as he stormed out, the door rattling in its frame. I sank to the floor, the weight of the truth crashing over me. My son wasn't mine, and he'd killed the man I loved. Yet amidst the shock, a grim satisfaction bloomed. I'd hit him where it hurt, stripping away his job, his home, his leverage. As night fell, I sat in the kitchen, the violets on the sill barely visible in the dark. their wilted petals mirroring my heart's ache. But the pain was mixed with a fierce joy. I'd taken back my power, turned his schemes against him. Victoria called again, confirming the trial was set, and the judge, a former pastor from St. Mary's, had a personal grudge against Ethan for scamming church funds years ago. The coincidence felt like fate, a final twist that promised justice. I clutched the flash drive, my anger now a blazing sword, ready to cut through Ethan's lies in court. He thought he could break me, but I was about to show him just how wrong he was, and the fight was only getting started. The revelation that Ethan wasn't my biological son and had murdered my husband fueled a fire in me that wouldn't die, and after kicking him out of my building, I was ready to tighten the noose. By Friday morning, I was a woman possessed, my anger morphing into a cold, calculated plan for revenge. Victoria, my lawyer, had already contacted Ethan's company, leveraging my controlling shares to ensure his termination was swift. A quick call to the property manager confirmed Ethan and Lisa had until midnight to vacate the apartment, or I'd have them evicted by force. But I wasn't done. I sat at my kitchen table, the flash drive with the video of Ethan sabotaging my husband's car in one hand, my laptop open to his hacked email account. I dug deeper, finding a trail of transactions where he'd funneled money from his scams into offshore accounts, thinking he'd hidden it from everyone. With a few clicks, I transferred those funds back to the victims' accounts, using a backdoor Victoria's tech guy had set up. Each transfer a small victory that made my heart race with satisfaction. That evening, as the sun dipped low, casting shadows across my violets on the windowsill, I got a chilling alert from my security app. The motion sensor I'd installed after Ethan's knife threat caught movement at my back door. My pulse spiked, and I grabbed the pepper spray, creeping to the kitchen window. There he was, Ethan, in a black hoodie, jimmying the lock with a crowbar under the cover of dusk. My blood boiled, but fear crept in too. He wasn't just desperate, he was dangerous. I dialed 911, whispering my address, my voice steady despite the adrenaline. Ethan broke in, the door creaking as he stepped inside, his footsteps heavy on the hard wood. I hid in the pantry, clutching my phone and the spray, my heart pounding like a drum. "You can't hide from me," he growled, his voice echoing through the house as he rifled through drawers, looking for the flash drive. "I'm taking what's mine." I stepped out, spray raised, my voice cutting through the dark. "You'll never find it, Ethan," I said, my tone icy with defiance. "The police are on their way, and you're done." He spun around, his eyes wild, lunging toward me with the crowbar raised. I sprayed, hitting him square in the face, and he stumbled back, cursing and clawing at his eyes. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder as I backed away, my hands shaking but my resolve unshaken. The police burst in, pinning Ethan to the floor, his screams of rage filling the house as they cuffed him. I handed over the flash drive to the lead officer, explaining the video and his crimes in a calm, measured tone, even as my insides churned with triumph. They hauled him out, his face red and tear-streaked from the spray, his threats fading into the night. Back inside, I collapsed into my husband's armchair, the weight of the night crashing over me. The violets stood silent, their petals catching the faint glow of a streetlight, a reminder of the life I was fighting for. I called Victoria, my voice thick with a mix of exhaustion and glee. "He's gone," I told her. "They caught him breaking in." She confirmed the trial was tomorrow, and the judge, Pastor Reynolds from St. Mary's, had a score to settle with Ethan over those stolen church funds. The coincidence felt like a gift from fate, a perfect setup for the final blow. I'd stripped Ethan of his job, his home, and now his freedom was next. The satisfaction was electric, coursing through me like a live wire. But it wasn't over. The courtroom awaited, where I'd unveil every dirty secret, ensuring Ethan faced the consequences of his betrayal. He thought he could outsmart me, but I was about to show him just how wrong he'd been, and the victory would be sweeter than I'd ever imagined. The aftermath of Ethan's break-in left my house feeling like a battlefield, but I woke Saturday morning with a calm resolve, ready for the courtroom showdown that would seal his fate. I dressed in a sharp navy suit, pinning on my mother's pearl brooch for strength, the weight of the flash drive in my purse like a loaded gun. Victoria had prepped me all night, her voice steady over the phone as we reviewed the evidence, the video of Ethan sabotaging my husband's car, the forged deeds, the stolen church funds, and now his attempted burglary. My heart ached for the boy I'd raised, but the pain of his betrayal, his attempt to kill me, hardened into a fierce determination to see justice done. I drove to the Chicago courthouse, the city's grey skyline mirroring the heaviness in my chest, but a quiet thrill pulsed beneath it, the anticipation of watching Ethan's world crumble. Inside the courtroom, the air was thick with tension. Ethan sat at the defendant's table, his face bruised from the pepper spray, his eyes avoiding mine as his lawyer, a slick guy in an overpriced suit, shuffled papers nervously. Lisa wasn't there, likely having bailed on him after his arrest. Victoria stood beside me, her presence a steady anchor as we took our seats. The judge, Pastor Reynolds, now Judge Reynolds, entered, his familiar face from St. Mary's Church etched with lines of authority. As he settled in, his eyes locked onto me, and a flicker of recognition passed over him. "Evelyn," he said softly, his voice carrying across the silent room. "I remember you from the congregation, always so kind." My heart skipped, but before I could respond, he turned to Ethan, his gaze hardening. "And you, Mr. Carter, I remember too, for stealing from our church's charity fund years ago." The trial kicked off with a bang. Victoria presented our case, laying out Ethan's crimes with surgical precision: the fraud, the identity theft, the murder. She played the video on a courtroom screen, Ethan's hooded figure cutting the brake lines in chilling clarity, the room gasping as the evidence hit. Ethan's lawyer tried to spin it, claiming the video was doctored, but Victoria countered with bank records showing insurance payouts he'd funneled to his accounts. Then came the bombshell. Judge Reynolds leaned forward, his voice booming. "I was one of your victims, Ethan," he said, his words slicing through the air. "You conned me out of thousands for that fake charity drive, and now you dare face this woman who raised you." The courtroom buzzed, Ethan's face draining of color, his lawyer stammering objections that fell flat. Victoria piled on, presenting the break-in report from last night, complete with police photos of the crowbar and Ethan's tear-streaked face. The judge's expression grew darker as she revealed my ownership of the apartment complex and Ethan's company shares, proving his motive to steal my inheritance. When it was my turn to speak, I stood, my voice steady but raw with pain. "This man," I said, pointing at Ethan, "killed my husband, stole my identity, and tried to silence me with violence. He's no son of mine, not anymore." Ethan's head dropped, his shoulders shaking, but I felt no pity, only a hollow ache for the boy I'd once loved. The judge didn't hesitate, his gavel slamming down as he ruled. "Ethan Carter, you're guilty of fraud, theft, and attempted murder," he declared. "You're remanded to custody, effective immediately." Police moved in, cuffing Ethan as he shouted, his voice desperate and broken. "You can't do this," he screamed at me, his eyes wild with rage. "I'm your son." I met his gaze, unflinching. "You stopped being my son the day you chose greed over family," I said, my words final. As they dragged him away, the courtroom fell silent, the weight of justice settling over me like a heavy blanket. I sat back down, tears welling but not falling, my heart torn between the pain of losing the boy I'd raised and the relief of seeing him face the consequences. Victoria squeezed my hand, whispering that we'd won, but it didn't feel like victory, not yet. Outside, the Chicago wind hit my face, and I looked at the violets in my mind's eye, their wilted petals a reminder of what I'd lost, but also of the strength I'd found. The fight was over, but the healing was just beginning, and I was ready to face it with my head held high. The courtroom victory left me hollow, the image of Ethan in handcuffs seared into my mind as I drove home under Chicago's grey skies. By Monday morning, the adrenaline of the trial had faded, replaced by a heavy ache for the son I'd lost, even if he wasn't mine by blood. I sat in my kitchen, the violets on the windowsill perking up slightly after I'd watered them, a small sign of life amidst my grief. My lawyer, Victoria, called to confirm Ethan's charges, fraud, theft, and attempted murder, would keep him behind bars for years. But she also had news. Lisa had left him, fled the city with no forwarding address, pregnant with my grandchild. The thought of that baby, innocent in this mess, tore at my heart, but I pushed it aside to focus on the present. Ethan had reached out from jail, requesting a visit, and against my better judgment I agreed, needing to face him one last time. At the county jail, the air was thick with disinfectant and despair. Ethan sat across from me in the visitor's room, separated by a scratched glass partition, his orange jumpsuit a stark contrast to the cocky son I'd known. His face was gaunt, eyes sunken, the fight drained out of him. "Mum," he started, his voice low and cracked. "I'm sorry. I got caught up in greed, in wanting more than I deserved. I didn't mean for Dad to die. It was supposed to just be a scare." His words hit like a punch, a confession that confirmed my worst fears but carried a flicker of remorse. I leaned forward, my voice steady but laced with pain. "You killed the man who raised you," I said, my eyes locked on his. "You sold my life to criminals, threatened me with a knife, broke into my home." "Sorry doesn't fix that, Ethan." He looked down, tears pooling, and for a moment, I saw the boy who'd clung to me during thunderstorms, not the monster who'd betrayed me. "I know I don't deserve forgiveness," he said, his hands fidgeting with the phone. "But I'm trying to change. I'm in a program here, learning to face what I've done." I wanted to believe him, but the wounds were too fresh, the pain of his actions too raw. I thought of my husband's letter, urging me to protect myself, not to destroy, and it softened me just enough. "I'm not ready to forgive," I told him, my voice trembling with the weight of it all. "But I'll send you books for that program, maybe a letter now and then. You've got to earn your way back, not to me, but to yourself." Leaving the jail, I felt lighter, not because I'd forgiven him, but because I'd set boundaries, reclaiming my peace. Back home, I sorted through the basement documents again, finding a photo of Ethan as a toddler, laughing in my husband's arms. The ache returned, a deep sorrow for the family we'd been, but I tucked the photo away, focusing on the future. Victoria helped me contact the prison's rehabilitation program, arranging for Ethan to receive self-help books and counseling resources, a small step toward redemption I wasn't sure he'd take. I also tracked down some of his scam victims, using my newfound wealth to repay them, each check a quiet act of healing, not just for them, but for me. By week's end, I sat in my husband's armchair, sipping coffee from my chipped mug, the violets catching the soft morning light. The pain of Ethan's betrayal lingered, but it was tempered by a growing sense of recovery, a belief that I could rebuild my life. Victoria called with one last update. The judge had pushed for a review of Ethan's case to ensure he got help, not just punishment, a nod to the pastor's compassion I'd known at St. Mary's. I wasn't ready to let Ethan back into my heart, but I felt a flicker of hope, not for him, but for the woman I was becoming, stronger, wiser, and ready to face whatever came next. The road to healing was long, but I was walking it, one steady step at a time. The courtroom's echo and Ethan's tearful jailhouse confession lingered in my heart. But by spring, I was ready to turn my pain into something bigger, something that could heal others as much as it was healing me. With the $7 million fortune my husband left behind, I decided to build a legacy of hope, not just for myself, but for women like me who'd been betrayed by those they loved. I sat in my kitchen one morning, the violets on the windowsill blooming brighter than ever, their purple petals a quiet symbol of renewal. My chipped coffee mug warmed my hands as I met with Victoria, who'd become more than a lawyer, a friend guiding me through this new chapter. We laid out plans for a foundation, dignity restored, to help elderly women facing fraud or family abuse, using my wealth to fund safe houses and legal aid. By summer, the foundation was up and running, and I poured every ounce of my strength into it. We opened our first safe house in a quiet Chicago suburb, a cozy, renovated home with a garden where women could find peace. I walked through it on opening day, the smell of fresh paint mixing with the scent of roses outside, and met the first residents, 40 women, each with a story that cut me deep. One, Margaret, a 72-year-old widow, had been conned out of her savings by her nephew, left with nothing until we stepped in. Another, Clara, had been pressured by her daughter to sign over her farm, much like Ethan tried with me. Helping them felt like stitching up my own wounds, each woman's smile a small victory that made my heart swell with purpose. But the past wasn't done with me. One afternoon, as I sorted donation checks at the foundation's office, a new volunteer walked in, a woman named Susan, her eyes sharp but haunted. She introduced herself, saying she'd been one of Ethan's scam victims, conned out of her retirement fund years ago when he'd posed as a financial advisor at St. Mary's. My stomach dropped, but she grabbed my hand, her voice firm. "I'm here because you gave me back what he stole," she said, her gratitude raw. "Your foundation paid my debts, gave me a place to stay. I want to help others now." Her words hit hard, a reminder of Ethan's damage, but also of the good I was doing. I hugged her, tears welling, and we spent the day filing legal papers for new residents, her presence a quiet challenge to keep going. Running the foundation wasn't all smooth sailing. Some days, I'd get calls from women whose families fought back, threatening lawsuits or showing up at the safe house, much like Ethan had broken into mine. One man, a grandson trying to reclaim his grandmother's estate, showed up shouting at our gate, but our security team sent him packing, and I felt a surge of pride in the fortress we'd built. I hired counselors to help the women rebuild their confidence, and I spoke at community events, sharing my story to raise funds, my voice steady despite the ache of reliving it. Each speech strengthened me, turning my scars into a shield, a testament to my resilience. By fall, Dignity Restored had helped 45 women, and we were planning a second safe house. I sat in my garden one evening, the violets catching the golden light, and thought of my husband, how proud he'd be of this legacy. The pain of Ethan's betrayal hadn't vanished, but it had transformed, fueling a mission that gave me purpose. Susan joined me sometimes, sharing her own progress, now training to be a counselor for the foundation. Her strength mirrored mine, a reminder that we could rise from ruin. As I sipped my coffee, the mug's familiar chips grounding me, I felt a quiet power, not just from the money, but from turning my grief into hope for others. The fight had changed me, made me unbreakable, and I was ready to keep building, one life at a time. 4 years after the trial, my life had transformed in ways I never could have imagined. a tapestry woven from pain, triumph, and hope. I sat on the porch of my Chicago home, the violets on the windowsill now thriving in full bloom, their vibrant purple a testament to my own rebirth. My grandson, Tommy, Lisa's boy, now 3 years old, giggled as he chased a butterfly through the garden, his tiny sneakers kicking up dirt. Lisa had left him with me after fleeing Ethan, and I'd taken him in, raising him with the love I'd once poured into his father. Dignity Restored, my foundation, had grown into a beacon, helping 45 women reclaim their lives from fraud and betrayal, with 2 safe houses running and a third in the works. Each letter from a woman we'd saved, thanking me for giving her dignity back, felt like a piece of my heart mending. Ethan had changed too, in ways I hadn't dared hope for. After 2 years in prison, he'd joined a rehabilitation program, writing me letters that started with apologies and grew into reflections on his greed. Last month, he'd been released on parole, and I'd offered him a job at the foundation, not as family, but as a chance to prove himself. He showed up one crisp morning, his face older but softer, helping unload supplies for the safe house. "Mum," he said quietly, unloading a box of blankets, "I don't expect you to trust me, but I'm trying to make things right." I nodded, my heart caught between caution and a flicker of warmth. He worked hard, his hands steady as he painted walls for the women's rooms, and I saw glimpses of the boy I'd raised, not the man who'd betrayed me. One Sunday, we sat together in the garden, Tommy napping on a blanket nearby. Ethan handed me a letter he'd written for the Foundation's newsletter, a raw account of his mistakes and his journey to change, meant to inspire others. I read it, tears pricking my eyes, not from pain, but from the possibility of redemption. "You've got a long road," I told him, my voice gentle but firm, "but you're walking it, and that's what matters." He looked at me, eyes glistening, and for the first time in years, I felt a bridge forming, fragile but real, between us. Forgiveness wasn't easy, but it was a choice, one my husband's letter had urged me to make, not to erase the past, but to build a future. The Foundation's third safe house opened that fall, and I stood at the ribbon cutting, surrounded by women whose lives we'd changed, their smiles brighter than the Chicago skyline at dusk. Susan, the volunteer who'd been Ethan's victim, spoke at the event, her voice strong as she praised our work, her own healing a mirror to mine. Later, as I rocked Tommy to sleep, his soft breaths against my shoulder, I thought of my husband, his wisdom guiding me through the storm. Justice had been served, not just in Ethan's punishment, but in the lives we'd rebuilt, including his. I'd turned betrayal into purpose, pain into hope, and that was my true victory. As I sipped coffee from my chipped mug, the violets catching the evening light, I felt a peace I hadn't known since before the church whispers began. Ethan was still earning his way back, but I believed in second chances, not just for him, but for all of us. My life was full, with Tommy's laughter, the Foundation's mission, and a family slowly healing. I'd fought for my dignity and won, proving that even in the darkest moments you can rise, rebuild, and find a brighter tomorrow.